Good evening, everyone. Happy Sunday evening. It is early in the week. This is not the norm for the Dogs Down South podcast, but lots to look forward to this week. Georgia is, I guess, could say officially off of bye week one. And so this is our first of many biggest weeks of the year. With obviously, we get a head to head meeting with Alabama that is, we're not used to playing in the regular season. So definitely will be interesting. I wanted to start the week off a little early to get a few extra sessions in this week because I have a really special guest that's going to come on that kind of can tie some things together for us. And I thought it'd be cool to talk football. We can do a little bit of a early look at 2 weeks from now, which Kirby doesn't like to do this, but we are. We're going to look ahead at Georgia versus Auburn. Obviously, though, we're going to talk about Georgia and Alabama. But let me add my special guest, Mr. Tim Estes. Tim, happy Sunday evening. How are you today?
Hey, Ted, thanks for having me. Look forward to this. And I do watch your show every week and really enjoy the information that you're providing. In fact, you're where I get a lot of my Georgia information to do on my show. And so I appreciate the way that you handle that. And you and Bobby Riles have been friends for a long time, as well as Fish. He's always a lot of fun to watch. And I've enjoyed seeing Rich Man, and he's been a really good addition to your show. So I really look forward to this.
Yeah, man, it's a really fun crew. You know, we do it for fun. Hopefully we can give great content to everybody that's not so opinion based. Kind of like tonight. I love being able to get with you and talk football and big Auburn fan. But before we get into that tonight, Tim, we started this all out. You kind of got me started in podcasting, and I started watching you in the Integrity Sports podcast, and love doing that. And I know how you and your community loves to turn your show on and hear what's new and what's going on. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the Integrity Sports podcast and what it all contains and what you've been up to lately?
Well, the Integrity Sports Podcast focuses mainly on our three local area high schools: Southland Academy, Sumter County High School, and Schley County High School. And then we have two colleges in our area: Georgia Southwestern, that is a NCAA Division II institution, and then South Georgia Technical College, which is part of the junior college conference here in Southwest Georgia. And we try to do something once a month. Our program airs once a week, but at least one time per month, I want to do something that sheds some positive light on one of those five schools. And I'll tell you something that's neat, Ted. The newspaper industry, especially in small towns, is struggling, and you don't get many of the human interest stories anymore. And so we have kind of become a source of positive sports news for these student athletes in our area, and our community has really bought into it. We're averaging about 3,000 views a week. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I'm like you, I'm doing this as a hobby, not for a living. And we're trying to do it as professionally as possible. But I tell you what, I'm not very tech savvy, and I need somebody that is.
Yeah. Yeah, you do a good job, man. You do a great job. You were so humble and just shooting me. It was like two people trying to go, hey, man, I'm kind of getting my feet wet, but here's what I've learned as I'm getting my feet wet. And I'm like, thank you so much, because if there's anybody listening that is like, all right, like, what is it like to start a podcast? Well, you made it easy, and it's a lot easier than I thought. But you guys put out great content. And I know you guys as far as just like Dogs Down South, if you haven't done so, make sure you go follow the Integrity Sports Podcast. I know they're always talking about YouTube. They're trying to get their followers up over there, over on YouTube, and any other podcasting website that hosts Integrity Sports Podcast, especially Facebook, but exceptionally YouTube, as well as on Dogs Down South. We are on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts 24 hours later. You get to hear this one if you're not listening tonight, or you are listening and you're like, man, I would love for so-and-so to get a chance to listen to that. It will be on Apple Podcasts 24 hours from now. So hopefully this week you'll get to stream it as much as you want to. But please go follow both the Integrity Sports Podcast as well as Dogs Down South. So what's our connection, Tim, other than obviously you were my coach, you were my my summer league coach, but more than that, you were a huge mentor to me outside of baseball and inside of baseball. But today we get together and talk about something that connects us, which is football. But the more so, it's obviously Georgia Alabama week, and then in 2 weeks, Georgia Auburn comes to Georgia as their first SEC road game. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But obviously, the Iron Bowl is something how you can kind of speak into this. Obviously, as an Auburn alum, and as every year being able to look, take on Alabama in the Iron Bowl as kind of your big time rival. Obviously, you look at Alabama, and so we want to just talk a little bit about Alabama and kind of introduce our viewers and our listeners this week. But Kalen DeBoer obviously is a new name. He's kind of becoming a little bit more grounded as the name at Alabama now. Nick Saban is slowly but surely. I don't think he'll ever take a huge sidestep from Alabama, but Kalen DeBoer's but kind of becoming the guy, and Nick Saban is slowly trickling off a little bit. So tell me really quick, what do you think Caleb DeBoer brings to Alabama this year that's different than Nick Saban?
Well, Nick Saban, as much as I hate to say it, is the GOAT. And I think there wouldn't be very many people that would disagree with that. And so it's going to be hard to match what he brought to Alabama for so many years. And when they named DeBoer the coach, I had to go look and see who this guy was. Really, all I knew about him was he had been the coach at Washington for a couple of years and made his way into a national championship. Well, what connects Caleb DeBoer and myself is I played NAIA baseball, and
Okay.
he coached NAIA football at Sioux Falls and won 3 national championships, 2006, 2008, and 2009. From that point on, he went on to coach, as an assistant at several Division I level schools, and finally got his shot as a head coach at Washington. And when he was at Washington for 2 years, went 25-3. So when you look at what does the Alabama AD look at? Well, 25-3 as a head coach is pretty good. I'm sure he dug into the background and saw what he did at Sioux Falls, winning 3 national championships. But this is probably one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the country. Do you give a guy a shot just because he's won a few times? No. Caleb DeBoer, here's what Alabama likes about him. Despite what your image of an Alabama fan may be, the University of Alabama wants somebody that's committed to athletic and academic excellence in the classroom. And Caleb DeBoer's got some really unique programs that his student athletes are a part of to help them be successful academically. And they also want somebody that carries themselves well, that has good integrity. And Caleb DeBoer so far has seemed to do that. He kind of fits the bill. As far as long-term, how will he be compared to Nick Saban? I think only time will tell that. But so far, so good. He's still playing with the majority of Nick's players. So we'll see how he does once those guys move on and he has a chance for him and his staff to bring those guys in. But so far, he's impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 3-0. I know there's already been a little bit of just some voices coming out of Tuscaloosa. I know they opened up the season against Western Kentucky, and then they got into USF, and USF, just like Tennessee, I mean, and some of these teams that run this spread offense really, really well, they're going to expose and do some things that really are challenging. And I don't think that is something that the game was a little bit closer than it should have been, probably against USF. And then they obviously went on the road to Wisconsin, and they had Wisconsin's quarterback went out, first, second set of plays, and so I think some people are still wondering who Alabama is. What are they under Caleb DeBoer? They've seen Jalen Milroe be Jalen Milroe, obviously, but the hollers and screams you have are, what is this Nick Sheridan guy doing as the offensive coordinator? They feel like the offense is not ticking as well as it could be, but you have to remember, he is working with some of Nick Saban's players, but he has a rebuilt secondary. He has a rebuilt offensive line that has some Washington players on it. And this offense is learning a new offense, and the defense is learning a new defense. And so I think you're going to see a lot of, you're really going to see the first test. I don't know. I mean, Georgia's been tested, but you're going to see the first test as far as on the road for Georgia. True road game in an atmosphere where no Nick Saban's in Alabama. And then for Kalen DeBoer, it's the first SEC game of the year for them, and it's the first game that, in my opinion, is actually going to probably make them, really have to buy into where is their team at as far as morale, culture, things of that nature, and who are they going to go to when it gets tight and tough. It's going to be a good game. I'm hoping that weather doesn't get involved with this. We have a little bit of a tropical storm hurricane brewing out here in the Gulf, and so safety first though before football. Hoping it doesn't, even bother anybody towards the inland. But let me ask you this. Here's the question, because I think you said this, but we'll hit on it. But long term, a lot of people are just like, all right, we're weighing our decision out here. Is this a dying dynasty? Is the Nick Saban era over? So therefore, Alabama is over. How long can this wave of Nick Saban continue to? They put the statue up, they named the field after him, and how long can that continue to keep players coming to Alabama? Is this a dying dynasty, and Kalen DeBoer is going to be holding on to this for a little while, or do you think Caleb DeBoer is going to take this and either continue it or even make it better?
As an Auburn fan, I really hope that the dynasty is dwindling.
Yeah.
But in reality, as a professional, you look at these things and go, they're still Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, I'm old enough to remember the Mike Shula days
Hmm.
when Alabama had no intimidation factor. But Ted,
Hmm.
it's been so long since any of us have been able to look at Alabama on our schedule and just automatically chalk that up as a win. Uh,
Right.
like I said, I think time will tell.
Right.
And this week against Georgia is going to be the very first true test that I think he'll get as the Alabama coach. And we'll see what happens. But he is impressive, very organized. You can see that they don't have many of those pre snap penalties and things
Hmm.
like that. So, a lot of the same traits that Nick Saban had, he has shown. Can you sustain that? I think that's what made Saban the GOAT.
Yeah.
Nobody else other than Kirby has been able to mimic that, and so
Right.
we'll see what Caleb does.
Yeah. I love it, man. Obviously, offense and defense is completely different, right? A lot of
Yeah,
people said, Saban coached that secondary, so this secondary is not going to be as good. But I've seen a very feisty secondary. I've seen a secondary that's continuing to cause turnovers, create havoc, as Kirby likes to say. And I've seen the offense with Jalen Milroe really continue to produce just elusive big plays. They have a 17-year-old kid named Ryan Williams. I mean, he's crazy talented. I mean, this team still has a lot of things, even though they lost a lot, whether it be NIL or people transferring out. I mean, imagine if those players would have stayed. And I
yeah.
think so far, Kalen DeBoer's done as good of a job as you can ask. But let's just what do you think? As we've only seen a few games this year, but what do we think Georgia can expect on offense on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa?
Well, offensively, you have to start with Milroe, and Milroe's a big physical kid that's had a lot of success. Right now, he's thrown for 590 yards in 3 ball games, which is impressive, but not one of the top 5 or 6 guys. Like you said, he's got that freshman kid who I've really been impressed with, Ryan
Mhm,
Williams.
mhm.
I didn't realize he was only 17 years old, and that makes him even more impressive.
Yeah.
He's averaging 28 yards a catch. I
Mhm,
bet he's not close. He's got to be at the very top in the whole country
mhm,
as far as yards per reception. The guy you really got to look out for on offense, I think, is Jam Miller,
mhm.
their running back. If you look at his stats, they don't impress you a lot. He's rushed for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 games. What you may not see is he hasn't played most of the second half in 2 of those 3 games. And
Right.
so Jam Miller, Georgia's always been very physical up front, but they're going to have to stop the run and put this on Jalen Milroe. Jalen not being a freshman, but Ryan Williams is.
Mhm.
Uh, if somebody's going to beat me, I'm going to make it be a freshman.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be Georgia's game plan going in.
Yeah.
On defense, Alabama's only given up 26 points all year in those 3 games. Most of that's been in mop up duty.
Mhm.
Uh, they haven't been tested. They're going to be tested for the first time this weekend. So
Great.
we all know that Alabama, regardless of who the coach is going to be big physical up front. They're going to be deep. I think Kirby learned that from Nick Saban, and that's been
Mhm.
the strength of this Georgia team is both the offensive and defensive lines are not just huge. There's 2 or 3 deep. I noticed that last year at Auburn when they came out on the field before the game for warmups. They've got 3 times as many big guys that look good that are going to be those brutes up front as we did.
Right.
And so it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this matchup between Georgia and Alabama because it's probably the 2 most physical teams in the SEC, and they're going to have to see who outlasts the other.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of as we know this past week, there was some, there's still some question marks out there. And what I like about Auburn and Georgia, Tim, is we've stepped out there and played some people. I'm not too high on Ole Miss right now. I don't buy into anything Ole Miss is doing because until Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin decide to actually play a real football team, I don't really want to hear about it. Missouri got a really big scare now from 2 teams, Boston College and I mean Vanderbilt. The kicker duck hooked into the band, man, and didn't give him a
I
chance.
saw that.
And so I'm not as high on Missouri right now. It makes Alabama look a little bit better just because when they've been battle tested against some of these teams that, in my opinion, you know, out of those 2, and then even Texas. I mean, Texas has a win against Michigan, but I think Michigan was trying to get their life together, which everybody is second game of the year. So kudos to them because Georgia and both Texas at least stepped out there and said we're going to play Clemson, we're going to play Michigan, and I'll tell you what, man, Clemson, they really put it on. They played who do they play this weekend? I can't even remember, but whoever they played, they put it
North
on really
Carolina
well
State,
too.
I
Yes,
think
they
it was.
did. Yes, North Carolina State was it. Put it on them. The game was over at halftime. As well as if you look at Texas's win, it looks to be a little bit better because Michigan beat USC this weekend. So when you look at the SEC and how it's panned out and what we know right now is we got Alabama, Georgia, and Texas as really the teams right now that are like, all right, even though Georgia had a iffy game against Kentucky and we talked about it last week, it's hard, man. You got James Dumas Johnson who was with Kirby for 3 years. Helped win 2 national championships. He's on defense, man, and he is probably the best scout you can ever have for a week of preparing for Georgia's offense. And on the flip side, you got Brock Vandegrift, who's been with Georgia for 3 years running the scout team, who's probably going to tell you everything that defense is going to do. So it was literally a game of chess. And so sometimes the sky falls in Athens when the fans look at it and go, why in the heck didn't we kill Kentucky? We've never been notorious for killing Kentucky at Kroger Field. And we're definitely not going to do that with 2 players that have been with the program a combined 6 years and know the ins and outs of what's going on and look pretty good this past weekend as well. But kudos to Auburn for, everybody's going to have their games where they play. They gotta fill a schedule. But I think between Auburn, Georgia, Texas, and then I look at Alabama, I think they've been as battle tested as they can be as far as schedule right now. So kudos to that. But at the end of the day, Tim, what do you think it's going to take for Alabama to come in? And right now, I think Georgia, I think this number will get a little smaller, always does as we get closer to Saturday. But what do we think it's going to take for for Alabama to pull off the right now upset on Georgia? Georgia's favored by 3.5 or 3, and some depends on who you're looking at. But what's it going to take for Alabama to pull the upset Saturday night?
Well, let me say this off the get start. I'm not going to say Alabama's going to beat Georgia. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think it'll be a close game just because Alabama is so physical on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
If Georgia can stop the run and they can make Milroe have to throw the ball, Georgia's secondary, I think, has the edge on Alabama's secondary. So I definitely think that Georgia, if they make them pass, has the advantage.
Yeah.
On offense, I think Alabama's going to have some success running the football to the edges. That seems to be one of the areas Georgia needs to concentrate on is that outside edge. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking 12 or 14 or 18-yard runs, but if Alabama can gash you for that 5 or 6-yard run, that seems to be their forte right now. They'll take that type of game. So I think it's going to be just a physical. We call it here in South Georgia an old slobber knocker, and I think
Yeah.
that's the type of game we can expect.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one, man. I don't know why I get a little nervous. I think one of the the best things I've heard said in a long time was I think Georgia, I think Kirby's got Kirby's had 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama, and I can tell you we probably worked on us a lot the first week. You can say what you want to. I really don't think much of Alabama was introduced. We had a lot we needed to clean up, but I think this will be the first game where Kirby can look at it and go, I'm not playing against Nick Saban. We're not playing against Nick Saban. We're playing Georgia, Alabama now, and we can hopefully. For me, game day is going to be there, but I'm just hoping Nick just hops on a flight after game day and just gets out of town, man. Which I know won't happen. He'll probably sit up there in his box with his family and things of that nature. But it's going to be a really good game. I think at the end of the day, the physicality is going to be on display, and I agree with you. I think if Georgia can make Jalen Milroe beat us with his arm, I'll take that. I don't if we're betting on legs, then I don't know, man. I just don't know. And then as far as on the offensive side for us, I think as far as the offensive showing up, I just think we got to show up and we got to make sure that we are not. I mean, Tuscaloosa at night. I just think we can't be under the influence of nervousness, and we just got to do what we do. And I think it will be a successful game for us. But let's move along. Way too early look. We get to do this. Kirby will never do this, but way too early look. Auburn obviously coming off a tough loss, man, to Arkansas at home. Tim, I know you were at the game, and I know we're going to get to the hot seat questions where I'm going to give you a chance to really just give your professional opinion on what you're feeling as a fan, but also what you feel like as a person who knows sports and knows Auburn and kind of can speak into what maybe you think needs to happen soon. But before we do that and move on, give me your biggest Iron Bowl like moment where you're like, this one will never leave me. I'll remember this one until the next memory's made that will never leave me. But Iron Bowl memory, favorite one, go.
Kick six. I
Kick
think
six.
it's the best play in the history of college football. We've seen it repeated by teams that the game wasn't on the line, but this game was tied. It was the only way Auburn could win it in regulation. And Gus Malzahn, on a whim, stuck Chris Davis back there and saw that happen. So that's got to be the
Yeah.
best memory of the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. I thought you were going to go there, but I was going to give you the opportunity to do it.
Well, I
So
will
Tim,
tell you this, Ted. Let me just say
yeah,
this from a personal standpoint. The first time I ever attended the Iron Bowl was in 1988 when it was still in Birmingham every year. I had a girlfriend at the time that was a big Auburn fan, and as we were entering the stadium, somebody offered us $1,000 per ticket to sell our 2 tickets. And I
wow,
wasn't the huge diehard Auburn fan that I am now, and I thought, boy, we could get a lot of money for this, and we'd go
all right,
get a room somewhere and watch the game or go to
mm-hmm.
one of these restaurants and watch the game. And she was like, no, we're not going to do that. So I understood real quickly in my Auburn journey how important that game was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to attend the next year in 1989 when it was the first time that the game had been played at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, the atmosphere was electric. Coach Pat Dye, a very beloved figure for all the Auburn fans, tried for years to get that game on a home and home basis, and it
Mm-hmm.
finally happened. Alabama came in at 10-0. They were ranked number 2 that year, and Auburn beat them 30-20.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever thought that a crowd couldn't make a difference, I'm fully convinced to this day that the crowd that Auburn brought to the game that night was the difference in the contest. So a lot of good memories for the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. The atmosphere, and maybe I'm being partial because I haven't been to many SEC atmospheres. I'm hoping to go to more. But I had the chance of taking in the Georgia Auburn game last year, going down to Jordan Hare, being around the tailgaters and the Auburn family, and I can see now why Joe Lamb, who I'm still great friends with, but we were great friends growing up, turned and became an Auburn fan. I mean, he's one of the only guys I know that completely turned and went to go be an Auburn fan from being a Georgia faithful forever by experiencing one game day in Auburn. And I'll never forget, man. It's kind of weird. We used to cheer when Kirby was in the secondary together, and Georgia football is the days that, good Lord, man, if we thought we had heart attacks now in close games, back then it was just like between. I'll just keep it at that. It was a hard time to be a Georgia fan back then,
I
and so I
think
can see why he possibly did turn.
I think I took Joe Lamb to his first Auburn game, if I'm
I
not
think you did.
mistaken, and,
It was a Thursday night game, I think. I
yeah,
think it was
and I
a Thursday night
remember
game.
him getting in the car after the game, and he was, like, mesmerized, and he said, "This is just incredible. These folks love these people." And
Yeah,
so Joe has, kinda maintained like I have and been an
yeah.
Auburn fan, and we've experienced some joy, but boy, we are on the other side of that right now.
Crazy, crazy. Tim, when you look at it, Auburn's. Let's hop into Auburn real quick. We'll lead up to Georgia Auburn, but I want to give you a chance to talk about it a little bit. Obviously, one of the main things I talked about in the summer as we led up and did like an SEC kind of warm up and kind of talked about what we expect from each team that we play this year. 5 straight home games stuck out to me for Auburn, and I was like, man, obviously my brother, yourself, I have my people that are Auburn fans, so it's not as diehard as it used to be. I mean, me and Joe used to go at each other's necks pretty hard, especially if Georgia played Auburn. We didn't even talk to each other. We didn't even call each other. But now it's a little bit more chill. And the fact that I ventured out into, I think we all become a little bit more grown in our day and age, and know that football is great, but it ain't everything, right?
Right.
So 5 straight home games. And I'm like, man, this is going to give Auburn a great start to the year. I looked at some of the teams like Cal. I looked at Arkansas, which, in my opinion, we didn't know much about Arkansas, but we did know that they had Taylor Green. We knew that, we had a coach that was on the kind of on the hot seat,
Yeah.
and didn't know if he'd be playing for the first 3 or 4 games of the season. If he's playing for his job. But I looked at it and I said, up to Oklahoma, this is a great start for Auburn. Now, obviously, sharing the bad news that didn't do what we want to against Cal. Now, Cal is a little bit better than advertised, but didn't. But I think they were beatable. And then obviously you got Arkansas on the ropes this past weekend, and we just don't get it finished. Tell me about the outlook on the first 4 games, and kind of what you feel like should have happened and didn't happen.
Well, I'm like you. When we see the schedule, it first came out. You think if you can get a win over Oklahoma, who's in their first year in the SEC, it would have been their first SEC game on the road. And you think, yeah, we could start 5-0 and
Mhm.
go into the Georgia game being undefeated and match hopefully a Georgia team that is undefeated. And we
Mhm.
had a high hopes. You had a
Right.
quarterback that struggled last year in Peyton Thorne, and you just feel like, hey, they didn't bring anybody in the portal. They must have a lot more faith in him now that he's matured. And we know that Hugh Freeze is calling the plays now.
Mhm.
So we had a lot of hope going in, and boy, it just didn't pan out with Cal. We had 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions, and a fumble that night. So I think that's the difference in the ball game.
Yeah.
You give up 2 scoring opportunities that turn into scoring opportunities for the other team, and Cal beat us. And like you said, that Cal, they're a lot better than we probably gave them credit for. I saw last night where they dropped one to Florida State, and people say, well, Florida State's terrible. They're really not. They
Yeah.
got a very good coach in Mike Norvell, and their backs were against the wall, and they found a way. They've still got athletes. But, now that we're going into Oklahoma this coming week, and
Right.
you're sitting at 2-2, and you're thinking, well, if we lose to Oklahoma and we go into the Georgia game 2-3, now you start projecting down the schedule. Can we even get bowl eligible?
Right. Right.
And Ted, the truth is, if things turn out like we probably think they will right now, it's going to be a struggle to get bowl eligible. And someone asked me not long ago, is Hugh Freeze on the hot seat? And I said,
Mhm.
well, I don't think Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat at all. But honestly, a 3-9 or a 4-8 season, that'll get you on the hot seat at pretty much any SEC school.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Hugh Freeze when you're on the hot seat, so I'm gonna let you, answer some tough questions so your colleagues can really hear what you think right now and what's going on.
Okay.
What's been some bright spots? Obviously, you look at the games, and we can all say, I mean, we play some teams, obviously, where we wanna get some things accomplished. And you did that with those games. I think in the games where you played, and I can't recollect right offhand, but two games you should have won. The offense and the defense has looked really good. And by the way, I think the defense for the most part has done what it needed to do to keep the offense in the game. The bright spots I saw on defense was just I see a defense that's really flying around. I know I saw a unfortunate. It was a weird interaction yesterday. Not trying to bunny trail too far off, but kid laid a really hard hit to a player, and then the next play he got taken out. I'm hoping. Don't think it was on purpose, but did you hear about that injury? Do you know
I
if
did.
that
I was
what
there. I was
happened
right
about it?
there where it happened.
Wow.
And, we couldn't tell when it happened, whether
Right.
that was something that was intentional, or a lot
Right.
of folks are saying it was a non-contact injury, and I haven't
Mhm.
seen any replays of that to know,
Yeah.
but he probably laid the best hit we've seen all year, the play before that. So
Mhm.
it automatically enters a fan's mind the very next play when something happens, "Hey, did they retaliate?"
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
haven't seen any evidence of that, I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Best legal hit I've seen all year in college football. What are some bright spots this year for Auburn, when you've turned the game on and actually gone to the games? Like, what do you think's going well for Auburn this year?
Well, Hugh Freeze brought in what they're calling the Freeze 4, and we got five-star receiver Cam Coleman from over at Central of Phoenix City.
Mhm.
He's been a real bright spot. Even as a freshman, you can tell he's going to be a star in this league. Robert Lewis transferred over from Georgia State. He's been a big part of the offense. A guy I didn't know about, Lambert Smith, has really done well. In fact, he's Auburn's leading receiver. So I'd say the bright spots right now are certainly at receiver. We got to find somebody that can get them the football. But the defensive line has done well against the run.
Mhm.
We haven't got done well getting pressure on the quarterback. And I think that's a scheme thing. We're running a 3-5 up front, and we'll do well on first down and second down. And yesterday, 7 different times yesterday, they had 3rd and 7 or longer. And out of
Mhm.
those 7 times, we gave up a first down 5 of those 7 times. One of those times was a 3rd and 19, we gave up a touchdown. And
Yeah.
so, we gotta get better there.
Yeah. You know what I've noticed as a trend is, especially with Georgia. I mean, Georgia got the number one mark from the beginning of the year. By the way, sidebar, I love the negative attention coming off the Kentucky game. I love we dropped to number two. I love that. I just love the negative attention because the one thing I didn't want to be doing, and I kind of hoped would happen, was we didn't get to experience a loss from the Kentucky game, but we got to go in a little bit more humble, because that number one ranking has not done us any favors. I don't think it does many people favors. I got a feeling that no longer Texas rides this wave, whether it be when we meet up with when they meet up with Georgia. It just hasn't done really a lot of great favors for a lot of teams for a long time. But
Let me
I'm
speak to
noticing.
that just a minute,
Yeah,
Ted.
go ahead, go ahead.
So, a as an Auburn fan, we would love to be sitting in the position of Georgia, where you
Mhm,
go into an opponent's place and you play your worst game of the year
mhm,
and you still come out with a win. I think
yeah,
that's a sign of a great team, not just a good team, but the great teams find a way to win when they play at their worst. And I
yeah,
think Kirby would be the first to tell you, yeah, we didn't play well. And
mhm,
Kroger Field's not one of those places that you see on your schedule and go, boy, that's a tough place to play.
mhm,
Mark Stoops is a great football coach at Kentucky. And traditionally, like you mentioned, traditionally, it's been a struggle for Georgia, especially at night up there, and especially when Mark has 2 weeks to prepare for that.
mhm.
And so, uh, Georgia fans, I know we're not happy with it, but I hope you can put a positive spin on this by going, look, if that's the worst we did and we still came out with a win, we're in good shape.
Yeah, yeah. I think to flip the script, Tim, wouldn't you have loved to see as much as there was bright spots in these two games, but with Auburn versus Cal and Auburn versus Arkansas, if that was the worst showing for Auburn, wouldn't you have loved to have gotten like a slap on the wrist and still got the W against those two teams and being able to go and get better? But instead, it just when you take those L's earlier in the year, it's just the SEC is a very, very tough conference. And it's like, I mean, you look at the teams, there's no gimmies anymore, man. Vanderbilt is playing some of the best football they have played in a long, long time. It's just not an easy conference. But wouldn't you would have liked to take a W and kind of been like, now we can go back to the drawing board and get it right?
Absolutely. And if you
Yep.
look at those two games you mentioned, both mimic each other in the fact we had 4 interceptions and a fumble lost in both of those games. So 5 turnovers against any Power Four team is going to cost you.
Yep. Let's move on. Let's get you on the hot seat right here. I'm going to really get to see what you think. Let you kind of vent your frustrations. I was telling Tim before we came on tonight. He said honestly, I want to really just say my mind, but I'm going to be professional. I feel like that sometimes every week. If any of our listeners would have seen me against Kentucky, I was not a well put together man. I was changing jerseys. I was moving cups. Am I using the same cup that I usually use? Is the remotes in the right place? What did I do different today? So I was not in a good position, and so I would have loved to have this hot seat because I wanted to say some things that night. But I want to give you the opportunity. I still think before we start this that um, you know Auburn's definitely going in the right direction from Brian Harsin. I think Harsin got you guys into a lot of this junk.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a little bit. I mean, right now, Hugh and the gang has shovels, and I think you might need like a backhoe to
Yeah.
get out of the Harsin stuff, and the shovels are not just working. But let's get you in the hot seat real quick. Number one, so let's just get you in there right now. Is Hugh Freeze the right guy for Auburn? I know that I spoke specifically of I like Hugh Freeze. I think one of the worst things. It's so weird to say this, and I don't want anybody to think this is. I don't think what he did was right. But when Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss, before he got caught, right, with all this stuff going on, he was a very just go after it coach. There was nothing that could stop him from staying on the edge. His offenses were. I won't speak to the defense, but his offenses were just crazy. It was hard to guard receivers and cover the run and cover the scheme. We played him one year at Georgia, and they embarrassed us. They absolutely embarrassed us. But is Hugh Freeze the right guy still for Auburn?
I sure hope so. And I'll say this about Hugh Freeze. I like him a lot as a man. And he did make some mistakes while he was at Ole Miss. I think he was truly repentant for those mistakes. Had a great situation out at Liberty where
Yeah,
it wasn't only a good football program that he could lead, but it was the atmosphere that he needed for himself and his family to kind of get his life back on track. And I think he's done that. From the inside guys that I know over at Auburn right now, he is building a culture that's full of character, and he wants people to do the right thing. Here's what I think Hugh has had a hard time with over at Auburn. He's done a phenomenal job recruiting. And we've got more 5-star kids that are on the roster right now or committed for 2025 than Auburn's ever had. So he's done a great job on the recruiting trail. But Ted, you know this, every Saturday that you're at home, you have recruits all over the place on the field.
yeah,
How do you leave those guys alone and let other folks handle them and coach the game that you need to coach? So I
yeah,
think there's probably some issues behind the scenes there. I think they're going to give Hugh Freeze for sure one more year, regardless of what happens. As long as nothing unethical or immoral were to happen, I think he's for sure got one more year to turn this thing around. And I
yeah,
would love to see it be, like you said, like he had at Ole Miss during those days. The fact is, everybody's running that kind of offense for the most part now. When Hugh started it
yeah.
at Ole Miss, he was one of the innovators that did
Mhm,
that. And
mhm.
now half of the SEC teams run that offense.
Yeah, tough to guard. You saw it. You've seen, additions to that offense. I think one of the biggest additions you've seen that Josh Heupel added, and uh, Golish from USF is spreading those receivers out as far as they can go to the hashes, and just making you play one on one in the box, and just really cover well. Because if you're going to sneak somebody in from the outside, then you're really shorthanded on the outside. But if you're going to sneak somebody out from the inside out there, then the run becomes it's a tough offense to look at. I think mostly for me, that's what's made Tennessee so hard to beat. That's what made Ole Miss so hard to beat back then. But my next question is going to lead up to that. So why did it take Hugh Freeze so long to realize that, Peyton Thorne may not be the right fit on offense? Even going back to touchdown Robbie last year, and I question whether going back and forth between those two. A lot of people have said, well, they paid a lot of money in NIL to get Peyton Thorne here. You've seen Hank Brown. You've seen they got a lot of quarterbacks on the roster who, from numerous other Auburn fans, have said that there's potential there. Why do you think right now? And I wrote this question, pre Arkansas, because now Hugh Freeze is just scratching his head. He's like, I don't have. I think he just feels like he doesn't have a quarterback that can protect the football. So, but why did it take so long for him to even get past Peyton Thorne? But now he's back to him.
I think part of it's probably loyalty. Peyton Thorne was Hugh Freeze's guy that he went and got in the portal from Michigan State. Felt like he won the job his first summer and fall there. Struggled a lot last year getting used to SEC type play. Threw a lot of interceptions. Didn't handle the ball well when he was running, although he's got great legs. Had several fumbles where he just didn't protect the football. But I think when year 2 got here and we saw he didn't go get anybody in the portal this year, and he said, I'm going to stick with these guys. He put all his eggs in that basket. And when he threw all the interceptions against Cal, and listen, Ted, you may have watched this game, but he had 4 interceptions, but he had 2 other balls that hit defensive players in the chest that should have been interceptions. One of them actually was intercepted in the end zone, and they were called for pass interference. So that took that back. But I think there's a lot of loyalty there. I'm not sure. I don't want to believe that NIL plays a part, but it very well could. I know the business side of things gets involved sometimes. Hank Brown is also a Hugh Freeze guy. Hugh had recruited him out of Lipscomb Academy in Nashville to go to Liberty when he was there. And he's followed Hank Brown since he was a junior in high school. So I think he was pretty comfortable making the change last week. Hank had a good outing in his first start, but then the competition level stepped up this week, and you could see the difference in the first half. And I think at that point, Hugh Freeze decided, I've got to get back to something I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
And to Peyton Thorne's credit, he came in and looked pretty good. He did throw 1 interception. But you could tell he was a little more comfortable with the offense than Hank Brown was at that point. I don't know where he's going to go from here. I really don't. My personal feeling is if you're going to struggle and you see 5 to 6 games into this thing, hey, we're going to be a 5 or 6 win type team. Go with the young guy. Let him get his feet wet. Let him make his mistakes now, and hopefully he'll be a little better prepared when we start next season.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of SEC teams every year have to make that decision. There's other teams in the SEC who are juggling that and juggling the hot seat. I mean, I will tell you, Hugh Freeze is not a name that is battling it out for the hot seat right now, because we all know that between Billy Napier, we were all probably wondering if Billy Napier goes into Mississippi State this weekend and he lays an egg. I think everybody would have seen Billy Napier's name gone on Sunday morning, but he didn't. They got to win there. And so they're not there yet. And who knows? I mean, you got Tennessee coming to town, and Florida is the curse of Tennessee. So Tennessee could be I don't know if you watch it, but that SEC podcast with Cousin Shane and
no, I hadn't
all
seen
the
that
cousins.
one.
It's a good one, man. They're on Feinbaum a lot as well, but they're the guy, Cousin Shane's a big Tennessee fan, and he said, wouldn't it be like, because he doesn't like Napier a lot, he said, wouldn't it be like Billy Napier to just be a thorn in our side again this year, and for Tennessee to take one of their losses there, and for me to not really like Napier. And I said, well, watch out, because that soup's brewing pretty hot right now. But I would say that Hugh Freeze, I'm the same way. I would say Hugh Freeze is the right man for Auburn. I believed in that last year when they hired him. I just think, and you can see him, he's a defeated person right now. I saw him walking off the field when he hugged his kids and his wife, and he's battling it right now. He's like, look, I'm doing the right things. He even said last week, he said, Peyton Thorne looks like the number 1 guy in practice,
Yeah.
So maybe he even took a chance, and he said, look, maybe I've heard a lot of things about Hank Brown being just a really kind of baller kind of player. He can make things happen with his legs, his arm, But I think right now, one thing that needs to happen is I think we need to get to a spot where we go, Auburn wins all these games if we protect the football. If
Yeah,
we just protect the football. If even if I think that's why Hugh Freeze last year, everybody kind of joked about it, but it was like he was so conservative from a run versus pass type of, play calling style last year, is because he felt like if I don't shoot myself in the foot, I can have a decent year, last year. But this year, I think, and it's going to have to happen very soon because Oklahoma is a team coming that I think had a chance against Tennessee. I just think there was a lot of things that went against. Same thing with Auburn, went against Oklahoma as far as turning the ball over and on offense. But I do think Hugh Freeze is the guy, and for it sounds weird coming from a Georgia guy, but I hope he gets it together because
yeah,
I like Hugh Freeze. I've always liked his offense. I've liked him as a coach. I think he's a great motivator. I think he's doing great things with culture at Auburn. So I'm hoping that it continues, and not for the negative parts, not because he's losing right now, and we want to continue to have a good shot at beating you guys
that's
every year.
right.
But what's been the biggest difference with Georgia, as far as like Georgia and Kirby kind of moving to a prominent year-to-year contender in the SEC? But I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to say it. But Auburn's trying to get back to that, right? Get back to the days
They
of,
are.
you look at, you might not want to hear. You look at Gus Malzahn, and a lot of people have said, if I personally think, I'm going to call this one from left field, but if Gus Malzahn beats Florida, you might see Gus Malzahn as the coach at Florida. I'm just
Very
telling you, he
well.
recruits that area extremely well. But the days of Cam Newton and Gus Malzahn and the relationship that ended, maybe some say too soon, some say too late. But what's it going to take to get back there? And why do you think Georgia is at this pace, but Auburn is not right now?
Well, Georgia is the standard bearer in the SEC right now, not just because of the national championships that they've had, but the sustained success that they've had over so many years. I attribute a lot of that to the tutelage that Nick Saban did with Kirby Smart. And to Kirby's credit, he learned it. There's a lot of
Mm.
successful coaches that have been under Nick Saban that have been fairly successful. Kirby's really the only one that's been ultra successful. So I think a lot of the credit goes to Nick Saban and for Kirby doing that. What
Yeah.
has Auburn got to do to get there, man? I don't know. I think that's the question at every school in the country right now is, can we mimic what Kirby has built at Georgia?
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that, Ted, is holding folks accountable. If I had to tell you the one thing I've seen from Kirby Smart over all these years is Kirby loves every kid on his team, but he expects you to do the job that you're being coached to do. And if you don't,
Right.
he holds you accountable to that. I think
Right.
that's one of the things that's hurting us. And you and I talked about this a little earlier. But if an offensive guard on Auburn's squad right now allowed 3 sacks in a ball game, the next week they're going to see that on film. They're going to call that guy out. He's probably going to be replaced. You've got to hold your quarterback to the same standard.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I got some questions in here that I was going to throw out there, but I don't think I am. Just because, I mean, I think it's kind of harsh to say, like, who do you think wins? I know that if I
Well,
was
let
in the
me let
same
me
seat right
let me
now,
address that. Are you talking
yeah, go
about
ahead.
Auburn, Georgia?
Yeah, keys to Auburn going into Athens, first road game of the year for Auburn, and taking the W at Georgia.
Well, think about this. You and I were in Jordan-Hare Stadium last year when Georgia played Auburn, and
Mhm.
I was sitting with several of the Georgia parents. I actually had Carson Beck's parents sitting next to me. Met Brock Bauer's dad, who was a few rows behind, and it was a lot of fun. Those guys, it was so different than I expected. The parents of those players certainly want them to win, but they're so concerned that their kids don't get hurt
Mhm.
that they understand how to behave in the stands. They're not that
Right.
in your face kind of fan.
Mhm.
We went into that game much like we're going into the game this year. You
Mhm.
go in not expecting to win as a fan. You've got enough sense about you to know this team's much more talented. But every Georgia Auburn matchup seems to come down to one or two plays. And
Yeah.
I hope that's what happens this year. I certainly think Georgia's 3 touchdowns better than Auburn, maybe more than that right now. But we're going to go into Sanford Stadium with that hope that we play our very best game and something happens that we can get a chance to win. We're not
Yeah.
expecting to win. We're hoping to win.
Yeah. No, I like that. Classy answer. And I will say classy answer back is same thing when, my brother Mike would love to tell you we'll have dinner. I got to take in the entire scene in downtown um Auburn, and it was really cool to be on campus and just love the area down there. The fans are incredible. I can say honestly, the fans are classier than Georgia fans because I had this little old lady that at one of the tailgates. She said, "I have my Georgia gear on," and Mike and we walked in, and she said, "Look, you can come in and you can, you help yourself," but she said, "You don't, as long as you don't bark at me." And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "I'm not going to bark at you." And she said, "Well, that's good." So classiest fans ever, but I do think that's what's very scary is this is still a rivalry.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the SEC and rivalries in South Georgia, Alabama, Florida, they're just different. You can't, and Kirby's not going to look this over, and
No.
definitely Hugh's not either. These are recruiting channels that these we recruit the same kids, so these kids are going to show up, and just like if it's a Georgia official visit, it's going to basically be an Auburn official visit tryout as well because they get to see two schools within an earshot of each other playing, and they're always close. And even though fans want to look at it and go, "Well, this team's supposed to do this and that team's supposed to do that," I don't think that's going to happen for a long, long time. Not with NIL and not with players and all the nowadays used to you had to go. We were talking about it last week. You had to go. Okay, this is game week. We got to change. We got to exchange videos and now you can just go to YouTube and grab all the stuff you need and recruiting and things of that nature. We're just in an age where technology and recruiting and things, it's going to be tough for anybody to have an upper hand.
Yeah.
So if one, two things go wrong, any team is in the game at any time. And so you're not going to see that as well as Georgia and Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech is Brent Key is doing incredible things at Georgia Tech. This game's going to turn around for us as well. So I think between Georgia fans, Auburn fans, even Alabama this week, these rivalries are not going to be as cookie cutter as we think they're going to be because we've got to, as we call it, we've got to suit up, we've got to run out the tunnel, and we've got to snap the ball, and we got to play the game. And so there's
Ted, I
never a
wanted to
score.
also tell you I met I think he's your defensive coordinator. Is that Glenn Schumann?
Lynn Schumann, yep, you got
Yeah,
it.
got to meet him this past Friday night. He, as you know, I'm the voice of the Sly County Wildcats, and Zayden Walker, who's a five-star outside linebacker that's committed to Georgia, was
Yes,
there. And being an off week, Coach Schumann came to Sly County, and we got to talk for 15 or 20 minutes. And what a great guy he is. And they've just got a realistic outlook on these kids. And I said, man, you don't
yeah,
know how much it means for a small 1A school
yeah,
to have a guy like you here. And he said, Tim, what we're finding out is in these schools of this size, there's always going to be one kid on the field that can compete at our level. And many times they're missed.
yeah. That's so cool, man. That is so cool. I think the world of Lynn Schumann. You can see. I mean, Kirby has. I think the reason why a staff like this at Georgia, like Glenn Schumann, and the faces that we've added to the defensive staff and things of that nature, and the way Kirby has been able to keep his staff put together says a lot about Kirby, but also about the fact of we've been very true to Georgia, South Georgia, and recruiting down here very heavily. We go out there, but the majority, Kirby's about win the state, and you got a really great shot. And so I love that. And Sly County is man, they're not only. I mean, I know you guys have one of Sly County's own at Auburn, but we were glad to get one at Georgia. So
Yeah, that's
that's real.
actually his brother.
I did not. I was just going to ask. I was like,
Yeah.
those two names sound familiar. Is that the brother?
It is. So
So the,
Zacchaeus Walker is a starting defensive
yes.
tackle at Auburn. He's a fifth-year guy. He's already gotten his degree, so we're
Wow.
real thrilled about that. Zayden Walker is between number 2 and number 4, depending on which recruiting service you look at, but he's one of the
Okay.
top 5 outside linebackers in the country, and for good reason.
Well, I hope that I'm hoping his brother doesn't put the hard press on him anytime soon with any really cool Christmas gifts in the off season. So and he stays with us. But Tim, this has been really, really fun. Give me your final outlook tonight on just the remainder of the year with Auburn. Like, what are expectations? What would you like to see happen? I truly think that all this is not. I mean, we're not going as I was saying about Georgia and Kentucky last week. This isn't. The sky's not falling in Auburn. I think we're one really good game of seeing everything come together that this coaching staff at Auburn is trying to put together, just to letting them see what can happen on the field from possibly turning some heads, right? So what's your outlook on the rest of the year for Auburn?
Well, you say the sky's not falling, and I'll agree with you, but the sky's pretty close to
It's
falling
cloudy.
if we take a loss next week
Yeah,
against Oklahoma. I think it's a must-win game for the Tigers if we want to be bowl eligible, and so we've got to get that win. We've got 1 week to correct this ship, and then if you just win the games that you're supposed to win on your schedule, that gets you
right.
to wins 5 and 6. I think that's the floor is 6 and 6 at this
Yeah,
point. If we were to upset somebody, the ceiling is 7 wins. So there's not
okay.
much room there, and we got to win this coming weekend.
It's funny because I actually had Auburn. I think no, I had Cal. Not Arkansas. I had Cal circled, and I thought Auburn could be an 8-4, and I said if they could get Arkansas a 9-3 team, and
Yeah,
so 7-5 now is definitely a record that I think Auburn would look at and go, now this is a win. We got recruits, we have momentum, and third year for Hugh Freeze can be a huge success. Obviously, I'm hoping you take the loss against Georgia within
right.
good spirit, though, not in smack talking, but this has been really fun, man. Obviously, Georgia, Alabama week, and speaking into the Iron Bowl and what that means to Auburn, we kind of have a road as same traveled in that, because I know the experience when Iron Bowl week comes up, you guys kind of feel the same way, if not worse, with Alabama as you do Georgia. But it's a great kickoff to the week for us to be able to talk to you and talk about Alabama and get us kind of going. It's going to be a long 24-hour days that just drag out until we get to 7:30 on Saturday night. I know the whole world will be looking. It'll be a very widely televised game. So obviously that's where game day is going to show up. And then 2 weeks later, we're gonna see where Georgia and Auburn lie in that after they play Oklahoma. So big game for you guys at Oklahoma as well. So as always, Tim, thank you. The Integrity Sports Podcast is doing amazing things. I was telling you earlier, I was like, every single story is either a reminisce and a throwback that I love to hear, or something new that's going on that I didn't know was going on. And living in the Tampa area now, um, I still look back at my America's days, and I love being able to catch up and connect and still see what's going on, and what the light you guys are bringing to local sports there in a positive way is really, really cool. Seeing my old school, which is now Sumter County High School, but when I was at America, seeing them and being able to hear their story and know what's going on and keep up with Sly and Southland and all those schools, it's just really cool to see. So kudos to you. If you haven't already done so, please go follow on Facebook, but definitely on YouTube, where Integrity Sports Podcast is trying to get and hit their mark of, I think it's 1,000 viewers. How
That's
close
right.
are we, Tim? We
1,000
close?
subscribers. We're having
Subscribers.
1,000 viewers a lot, Ted, but
Yeah,
on YouTube, there's a difference between viewing and subscribing. You have to hit
yeah,
that subscribe button. We don't send out but one notification a week, and that's when we're getting ready to air that night. So we're not going to fill
yeah.
up your notification box.
Gotcha. Well, cool deal, man. Final thoughts tonight, Tim, before we get out of
I
here?
I just tell you, I've enjoyed this immensely. Always enjoy spending time with you, and I am truly a weekly watcher of Dogs Down South. Keep doing what you guys are doing. It's a lot of fun to catch up with you on this, and who knows, Ted? 2 years from now, we may have made enough connections that we get us some tech savvy folks, and we even look a little more professional.
Come on,
But
man.
I hope that our viewers, both on your show and mine, are getting what they came for, and
Yeah.
that's factual, positive information.
I agree. I totally agree, man. We are 2 years away from game day pickers, man.
That's
I'm
right.
seeing it happen, man. I'm seeing it happen. Well, hey Tim, always good, man. Hey, start to the week, Sunday evening. Start to a long week as we count down the days. Georgia, Alabama. Georgia fans, we will be live the rest of the week. We will definitely be picking these games. We'll talk more about Alabama. We'll preview Alabama, as well as look at what's going on, injury reports, things of that nature. Normal shows this week. We'll get with Fish. We'll get with Mr. Rich Man. It's going to be a great week. But until then, thanks for joining tonight, Tim. It's always a pleasure. And always remember, at the end of the day, start the week, go Dogs.